Chapter 4. We started the next day for the Laramie River, where we expected to visit another Sioux village whose chief was Black Moon. Also to meet some traders from Green River, men representing the Northwest Territory Company, and some opposition traders. There existed great rivalry among them to secure their furs and robes from free trappers, as our outfit was classed. Corporate companies were not friendly to free traders and trappers and made it very unpleasant for them when opportunity offered. In those days, the cream of men in the mountains belonged to the free traders and trappers, and it followed that corporations had no walk away, as mountain phrase had it. The Sioux were very wealthy from an Indian standpoint, owning vast numbers of horses and mules and furs and robes, and they were generally considered nabobs. They roamed the plains with their villages so as to be in close proximity to the buffalo, of which they required large numbers as meat was their principal food, and sent out war parties against their enemies, who were numerous and included Pawnees, Crows, Utes, and Iowas. So it followed that they kept constantly on the go, and for the recreation when a war party had returned from a successful raid, bringing back scalps and ponies, all women related to the party would decorate themselves in all their barbaric finery and promenade through the village singing and chanting the bravery of their lovers and husbands and making all the other women in the village feel abashed. This is the secret spring of war parties, constantly going out. The singing, dancing, and feasting are continued for several nights and days. Very different are the conditions when war parties return defeated. A gloom is cast over the village. Relatives of those who are slain or are missing cut off fingers and in other ways mutilate themselves, and a council is held by the medicine men to devise some plan by which they may get revenge on the enemy. Bear in mind, and this is true of all tribes, notwithstanding contrary statements by some writers who have had no general knowledge of the character of the Indian, either on the plains or in the mountains, an Indian never for a moment considers himself the aggressor. Sufficient for him is the fact that some member of the village has been lost. We reached Black Moon's village on the Laramie River the next day, camping near the chief's lodge. The story of our recovering the stock and the taking of 2 Pawnee scalps had preceded us, and the young warriors wanted to see the young paleface who had ridden close to the grove. They looked upon that as a great feat, though I failed to see it in any such light. As it was, it made me many friends among the young men. The older ones, however, said that I was a young fool and would lose my scalp someday. We traded for considerable furs at this camp, which somewhat astonished Williams, as there were 3 traders on the Platte River. The reason was, as I have already stated, that the traders were not up to their business in such ways as paying uniform prices for the furs of the same quality. A war party of young men came into camp that night from the Sweetwater River and informed us that a trader with wagons would be along the next day. The next morning we unpacked all our furs, classifying and rebaling them. Williams took great pains to instruct me in all this, saying that he intended to make me the equal of anyone in the business, as it might be useful in later years. I often think that he had a presentiment that I would never return to civilization. In the afternoon, an old trader named Vasquez arrived with wagons and oxen and was astonished to see all the furs we had collected. He looked surly, but this did not worry Williams, who understood his disposition. Williams should have been engaged by the government as a diplomat, for he could outwit any and all these arrogant corporate traders. At any rate, Vasquez saw that his only chance to get furs and robes was to curb his temper and come to terms, which he did, paying us $750 in cash for the beaver and other small furs, and a quantity of Indian goods, of which he had a fine assortment for the robes. Williams got the best of him on every turn. He either had to trade with us or haul his Indian goods back to the States, which he was not inclined to do. When departing the next day, Vasquez said that he would make this business of free trading most interesting for all concerned. I admired Williams's reply, which was, "Good, Mr. Vasquez. Remember, I will be on hand to take an active part in the matter when it occurs." We now had 14 pack horses loaded with a fine assortment of Indian goods and moved up the Platte River to the mouth of the Sweetwater. While making camp, 6 young Arapahoes put in an appearance and told us that their village was a short distance up the Platte River. It consisted of 100 lodges with Yellow Bear as chief. This was old Yellow Bear, father of the one killed on Sand Creek by Colonel Shivington. Williams rode back with the Indians to their village. His object was to have the Indians bring their robes and furs to our camp, as we intended making a long detour before reaching Green River. Yellow Bear and his son returned with him to inspect our goods, and being satisfied, returned to the village. We stood guard that night, as we were in a country dangerous from outside war parties. The next morning the village arrived early. They were wild-looking Indians and not to be trusted. They were a thieving outfit, as the whites found out in after years. Trade opened at once, and by noon we had 100 robes and a quantity of other furs. Then came a feast and a smoke with the chiefs, after which they all returned to their village. We hurried in packing up, for Williams wanted to reach the Independence Rock crossing of Sweetwater River as soon as possible. He was in hope of meeting another wagon outfit that might be coming from Green River, and to which we might dispose of our furs. We reached the crossing the next day at noon, but found only Vasquez's wagon trail. It was while at this camp that I had my first introduction to Crow Indians, when Williams halted a war party, or more properly speaking, a thieving party of 23 within 50 yards of camp. We had all our packs placed in a square, the robes making a fine breastwork. The Crows were very insolent and came very near bringing on a fight. In the first place, they wanted a feast, then our best horses, giving in exchange poor ones. They also demanded blankets and furs, all of which Williams gave them to understand they could not have. They next wanted to examine our outfit and trade, but Williams knew that they had nothing to trade, and he told them so, and also advised them to leave. At this, they became more insulting. We had 2 large shotguns, which we used on guard at night, as they were most effective weapons at close range, being loaded with a half-ounce ball and 5 buckshot. One tall Indian, diabolically painted, stepped towards where I was standing, and I brought my gun to bear upon him. At this he said, "Mastoshera mo monarca," and retreated. Perkins told me that it meant white man fool. Finally, the Crows asked for some tobacco, which Williams gave them with the understanding that they were to leave at once. And they did, casting in sign to us mean white men, all of which I understood. I felt very much like resenting, but was restrained by Williams, who said that I must not heed such things from Indians. After many years of experience, I fully agree with him. We remained in this camp 2 days and then started for the upper Wind River country, hoping to meet the Shoshones, who frequently remained in that section until May, furs still being in their prime. It is amusing to hear men from the east claim that beaver and otter are only trapped in the winter. Such is not the case, as beaver and otter trapped in April and May are classed A1. I have sold to expert fur buyers furs trapped in June, and some buyers credited themselves with being able to tell by the appearance of the fur in just what month in the year the furs were trapped. On our third day's travel, we met a trader named Pomeroy who had Indian goods on hand, expecting to trade with the Indians on the trip to the States. Williams told him that all the Indians he would be liable to meet were without furs, which was stretching it somewhat. We then unpacked our furs and robes and offered to trade for cash or goods. It required half a day to consummate the trade, we receiving $300 in cash and a quantity of Indian goods. Williams told me afterwards that Pomeroy would not make much on that trade. I think that Williams must have hypnotized Pomeroy, as he overlooked the important fact that at this season of the year, Indians were still dressing robes and would continue to do so for 6 weeks to come, and Pomeroy would have had plenty of opportunities to trade with villages on his way down the Platte River. But Williams made him believe that the villages were leaving for Buffalo, which was not so, as they had an abundance of meat and buffalo were close by. Williams was the soul of honor, and when I questioned him about this statement to Pomeroy, he smiled and said, Diplomacy. I have never forgotten that, and after years of observation, I find that honorable merchants follow the same tactics. Self-interest predominates among all, from the highest to the lowest. They evade the literal truth, calling their conduct business diplomacy.